My roommate asked to borrow my laptop. 3 hours later, the police knocked on my door. I handed Lila my laptop without thinking twice. She said her computer had crashed and she needed to finish something urgent. We'd been sharing an apartment for 8 months and she'd never asked before, so I figured it was genuine. 3 hours later, 2 officers stood at my door asking if I was the owner of the device registered to my name. My stomach dropped. I confirmed it was mine and they asked to come in, wanted to know about my online activity from that afternoon. I explained I hadn't been online. My roommate had borrowed the laptop. The older officer asked where she was now. I told him she'd left about an hour ago, mentioned something about errands. He exchanged a look with his partner that made my hands go cold. They asked if I knew what she'd been doing on my laptop. I said no, just some work thing she mentioned. The older officer's face was grim. Someone used your IP address to send threatening messages to a judge, detailed specific threats about his family. My brain couldn't process it. I kept insisting there had to be a mistake. Lila wouldn't do something like that. They wanted to know how well I actually knew her. Not well, I realized. She'd answered my roommate ad last spring, paid rent on time, kept to herself mostly. We weren't friends exactly, just people sharing space. I'd never asked much about her life. The officers wanted her full name, phone number, where she worked. I gave them what little I had. They asked to see my laptop. I brought it from my room where Lila had left it on my desk. The younger officer pulled up the browser history. I watched him scroll through pages I'd never visited. Forums about the legal system. Articles about judicial misconduct. A local news site with photos of judges, including the one who'd received the threats. The older officer asked if I had any connection to ongoing court cases. I said no. He asked about Lila. I started to say I didn't think so, then stopped. 2 months ago, she'd come home upset, thrown her bag across the living room. When I asked what happened, she'd muttered something about her brother and the system being rigged. I hadn't pushed for details. I told them about that night. The younger officer asked her brother's name. I admitted I didn't know. They wanted photos of her, anything that could help identify her. I pulled up Instagram and realized she wasn't on social media, at least not under the name she'd given me. The officers photographed her room, took the rental application I'd kept in my files. After they left, I sat on the couch trying to understand what had just happened. My phone rang an hour later. Unknown number. I answered and heard Lila asking if the police had been there yet. I told her yes and demanded to know what she'd done. I'm sorry for dragging you into it, but I needed an IP address that couldn't be traced back to me. I asked why she'd threatened a judge. Her voice went flat. He wasn't a judge. He was the man who let my brother's killer walk free on a technicality. She told me her brother had been 15 years old when he died because someone was texting while driving, and the judge had thrown out the blood evidence over some procedural error. She'd been planning this for months, she said. Found me through tenant listings, knew I worked from home and would have a clean digital history. I asked if she'd actually meant the threats. There was a long pause. No. I just wanted him to feel afraid the way my family had felt watching that driver walk out of court. She wanted him to know someone remembered what he'd done. Then she apologized again and hung up. The police found her 3 days later. Turned out her real name was Autumn, and her brother Mark had died 2 years ago. But when they searched her actual apartment across town, they found something I hadn't known about. Evidence that the judge had been taking bribes to dismiss cases. Documents, recordings, financial records. She'd been investigating him for 18 months. The threatening messages were never the point. They were bait to get the police to subpoena his communications, to start looking at his cases. She'd needed them to dig. The charges against her were dropped. The judge was arrested instead. I got a card in the mail months later, unsigned. It just said, Mark would have been 17 today.